Today, we're going to get into a really powerful piece of work by Annie Jung called Lost Spring. Through this explainer, we're going to explore the absolutely heart-wrenching stories of children whose childhoods are, well, stolen by poverty and tradition. Let's get right into it.
Just think about that for a second. This one sentence, from a young boy, pretty much captures the entire soul of the book. It just opens up this world where a garbage dump isn't just trash, it's a place of desperate hope. This quote really sets the stage for the two lives we're about to get to know.
So the title itself, Lost Spring, is this incredibly powerful metaphor. The author isn't just talking about a season, She's talking about a fundamental, beautiful part of life that's just been snatched away. But what does she really mean by a lost spring?
And here it is, plain and simple. A lost spring is a childhood that never, ever gets to bloom. It's what happens when the daily grind for survival just completely overshadows everything else. It robs kids of school, of play, and really of the simple joy of just being a kid. This is the central idea we're going to see play out in our two stories. Okay, first up, we meet Saheb. He's a young rag picker, and his entire world is the garbage dumps on the outskirts of Delhi. Now, the author describes him as scrounging for gold, which is such a poetic way to describe a really harsh reality, where finding a single coin can feel like you've struck it rich. Now, here's where it gets truly heartbreaking. The author points out this profound irony. Saheb's full name, Saheb-e-Alam, actually means Lord of the Universe. But his reality? It couldn't be farther from that. He spends all day, every day, barefoot, just sifting through other people's trash. This contrast just brilliantly shows the massive gap between who he could be and what his life has forced him to become. And this, right here, this is his world, Simapuri. It might be on the edge of Delhi, but as the author says, it's miles away from it, metaphorically. We're talking about a settlement of makeshift homes, no basic stuff like sewage or running water. For these families, a lot of them migrants, survival is literally everything. And that last point really hits home. Having food is way more important than having an official identity. This is a really fascinating distinction the author makes. For the grown-ups, garbage is just a job. It's how they make a living, how they get their daily bread. But for the kids, like Sahib, it's something different. It's wrapped in wonder. There's always that chance, that hope of finding a coin, maybe even a 10-rupee note. It's basically a treasure hunt born out of pure desperation, a little flicker of childhood magic in a really bleak world. So then things change for Sahib. He actually gets a job at a tea stall. He makes a steady 800 rupees a month plus all his meals. Sounds like a step up, right? But the author makes this really important observation. He loses his carefree look. He's basically traded the unpredictable freedom of the garbage heap for the security of a paycheck. And this line just perfectly captures the real cost of that trade-off. That steel canister he now carries for the tea shop, it's heavier than the rag-picking bag he used to have. And why? Because that bag was his. This canister, it belongs to someone else. And in that moment, Saheb's lost spring is pretty much sealed. He is no longer his own master. All right, let's switch gears to another story of a lost childhood. This is where we meet Mukesh. He's a boy from Firozabad, a town famous for just one thing, making glass bangles. And here's the key difference. Unlike Saheb, who kind of accepts his fate, Mukesh holds on to a really daring dream. When the author asks him what he wants to do, he doesn't even hesitate. He just says, "I will be a motor mechanic." I mean, that simple statement is a huge act of rebellion. He's in a town where everybody's destiny is basically forged in fire and glass, and here he is daring to dream about cars and engines. But to really get why that's so daring, you have to look at the world he's trying to escape. Firozabad is just a town of scorching hot furnaces and these dark, tiny, airless workshops. Kids work here illegally in these super dangerous conditions. A lot of them end up losing their eyesight before they're even adults. It's an industry that literally just swallows up entire generations. And the scale of this, it's just staggering. The author estimates that about 20,000 children are trapped in this labor. Just let that number sink in. That's 20,000 stolen childhoods, 20,000 lost springs, all concentrated right there in Firozabad. So you have to wonder, why don't they just leave? Well, this quote from Mukesh's grandmother tells you everything you need to know. For her, being a bangle maker isn't just a job. It's a God-given lineage. It's their destiny, their karam. And this deep, deep belief in fate is one of the strongest chains shackling these families to the furnace. So it becomes pretty clear that this isn't about individual choices. Annie's Jung shows us that there are these massive, systemic forces at work that create this inescapable web of poverty for these kids. The author kind of sees their situation as a spiral, just going around and around between these 4 points. It all starts with poverty, which then leads to apathy, that feeling of just being helpless. And that helplessness is then exploited by greed, which ultimately leads to this huge injustice. It's just a vicious cycle that repeats itself, generation after generation. So Jung points out that there are really two different worlds working against these kids. First, you've got the family's world, which is trapped by poverty and the stigma of their caste. But then there's this external, vicious circle of moneylenders, middlemen, police, and politicians. Basically, everyone who benefits from things staying exactly the way they are. And this is the critical point. The weight of both of these worlds is baggage that gets put on a child before they can even understand what it is. They just accept it as naturally as their fathers did. So to dream of something else, to want to be a motor mechanic, that's not just a dream, it's an act of daring. And that brings us right back to our two boys, Saheb and Mukesh. Their stories really show two totally different reactions to this crushing weight. And it gives us this really thought-provoking contrast to end on. I mean, just look at this comparison side by side. Saheb, when he takes that tea stall job, he loses his freedom. He's no longer his own master. But Mukesh, even facing impossible odds, insists on becoming his own master. His dream, as fragile as it might be, is still there. It's this little flash of defiance. But there's one last, really poignant detail here. Mukesh's dream is to be a motor mechanic. Why? Well, he wants to work with cars, because cars are what he sees rattling down the dusty streets of his town. The author points out that few airplanes fly over Firozabad, so even the act of daring, the very shape of a dream, is limited by the world you can see around you. And that leaves us with this final, incredibly powerful question. It's a question about hope, about your environment, and about the very nature of what we aspire to be. It just perfectly sums up both the tragedy and that tiny flicker of hope in Annie's Jung's Lost Spring.